Hi, this is Emmy Thomas. I'm here with Pretty Morbid, and we're going to talk about what it's like to be you, Pretty Morbid. Can you tell us?
Um, yeah, so I'll try. Let's see. I don't know. I guess in like I don't know, being me, like in the life in general in the day to day is like really like boring and mundane. So I have a lot of frustration with that. Um, but overall, yeah, see, these are the like I've struggled with this for a long time. It's like I don't even know where to start with this.
I
Um,
always feel bad asking this question because usually people who are on here have a really hard time answering it. But then again, I also, like whatever, I've done like a little bit of empirical research as an academic, a law professor or whatever. And so, like, learning about this, you also don't want to ask leading questions or whatever. So, really, you can just, feel free to take it however you want. What is it like you day to day, or things about you that kind of like, are normal or different, or things that you think should be normal but are different or whatever.
okay, well, I guess you saying that kind of does um remind me or make me think like one thing I've connected to from I think both the book and watching some of the podcasts is the the tendency to like I guess play to the situation and not to like naturally have a sense of being expressive. Um so like I oftentimes don't really have I was just talking to my sister about this earlier, like I don't have any inclination to tell people like what I've been doing or what I'm going to be doing or or even have any sense of like how I've been or what I've been up to. And that's something that I've had to like actually like really work on over the past few years. So like I'm like I'm 24 now, and like when I was in college, like around like 19, whenever I would like go out with people and they would talk, they like if they asked me like, what's up, how's it going, what have you been up to, like I had no understanding of what to say. The question didn't make any sense to me. Um and I mean it sounds like I feel like that sounds like crazy to like a normal person, or I don't know. I just don't know what how like and I would talk to them and I liked it when they talked. Because I could sit and I could listen and I could like ask certain questions and they would elaborate more. And in particular with one friend, she it seemed like she would feel guilty that she was talking so much, even though I was asking her questions. So in the middle of talking, she would often get to a point where she like would just abruptly kind of like, yeah, yeah. So anyways, that's enough about me. What about you though?
Uh-huh.
Like this quick cutoff, and it would like totally derail my mind completely. And I would kind of like stammer and like I basically just had to tell her I was like I can't I don't please keep talking I can't just like switch like that.
Uh-huh. I wonder if she's just like, because I've heard some people wait to talk. They're not really listening. They wait to talk. In fact, that's I
Oh
think
yeah,
a Pulp Fiction quote. Do you listen or do
yeah,
you wait to talk?
yeah, and that's always a weird thing like you because you can they're just sitting there. I mean that does seem like a sort of expressive, like people who are expressive have that sense of like, oh, you say your thing and then I say my thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't really have to be coherently connected at all. And there's really no sense of like building a conversation or like solving anything. There's just you make your noises and then I'll make my noises and now we're happy.
Mm-hmm.
um and and I find that like really frustrating. I because people will just they'll either like ramble on and on and on, with no seeming like it doesn't seem like they're like trying to get anything done or want your input. They just want to keep talking. Or yeah, I don't know. It's just so it feels like very like strange to me to do that. I feel like some sense of like even if I'm having any like normal conversation, there's some aspect of like problem solving or figuring out or I mean, it does kind of this is kind of where it gets into like the gaming.
Yeah.
Like there's and even like transactional, like it's not relational. It's not that I don't care or have any like discard for someone's feelings or how their well-being is, but I mean, I even kind of see their sense of like it's functional, like we're sharing information functionally, and then you can understand things better. Um, and then you can go back to your living your life better, able to do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, somebody asked me, because I'm in Los Angeles right now, pet sitting, right? And so somebody was like, "Oh, you're in Los Angeles right now. Like, oh, let's meet up." Just some random person like you, except who also is in Los Angeles. So we're like on this walk, and she was like, "Do you still have a hard time with small talk?" And I was like, "Oof, small talk. Because what is the point?
yeah,
What is
yeah,
the
there's
point
no
of?"
point. Oh my God, it's maddening.
Yeah, and so I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, I do," you know, and I almost, insist on not doing it. So it's kind of funny you to say a little bit like talking past each other. Well, first, two stories remind me about my dentist cousin, just in case I forget, because my brain, after pet sitting these many weeks, dentist cousin, and then about how I just have now become like a trivia person. So like my I go to my cousin who's a dentist, right? He is my dentist, right? So I go and he's like, "Hey, what's been happening or whatever?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, nothing much." And then I realized like I actually did have like a big thing happening. I had like been, you know, I had gotten my first like truly professional musician gig. I had to join the musicians union, you know, so I was like, actually, but I'm just so used to being like, ha ha ha, same old, you know, because I just don't want to talk about like whatever's happening or try to remember, you know, like about, you know, what's happening with his life because we see each other probably, I don't know, the holidays and stuff. We see each other pretty regularly, but not like regularly enough to like care or whatever. But yeah, so that story. And then the other one is like I've started to just tell people things like, hey, did you know that they used to treat syphilis with malaria because malaria induces fever, a malarial fever that kills syphilis, and you
Oh,
can
whoa.
survive malaria usually pretty okay, even like back in the day, you know, like 18th 19th century. You were likely to survive malaria, but you would die of syphilis eventually. You know, it's like 100% terminal eventually, unless somebody like kills you of something else, you know, before syphilis will kill you, you know, eventually if you live long enough. So then, you know, because I'm just kind of like so interested in stuff like that, that I now am kind of like, I just refuse to small talk. If it comes to that, then I'm like, hey, do you want to hear?
Want to hear about syphilis? That's actually, I honestly need to like probably take that strategy because I've been like trying to figure out like how I can like turn social interactions, or well, I don't know, not into games, I guess, but like add some aspect of like, I don't know, whatever that is. Like there's like otherwise I do just sit there. Like I just don't have a sense to say anything. I will listen and I'll engage with that or ask questions. Um, but especially yeah, small talk tends to drive me insane.
Hmm.
Um, I don't really know how to reply to it. It's interesting thing you said about syphilis. Isn't that like how I think like Al Capone died that way?
Really?
Um, yeah, I thought he had like syphilis from many years, and like it started to like really progress when he was in prison.
Mm,
And I think like syphilis like drills into your brain or something. Like the
it's real
actual
bad.
it's like yeah, like the actual things like they literally have like some like corkscrew thing where it like deteriorates like the matter in your brain or something.
Yeah.
Um, which that's also weird actually, because that reminds me. So Al Capone, I think, was before he was in Alcatraz, or maybe when he was in Alcatraz. So okay, so my mom is adopted, but her family that adopted her, their her great great uncle was like a huge like mobster um in like the St. Louis area of Missouri back in
Hmm.
like the 20s during Prohibition. And like he actually, I think he ended up being cellmates with Al Capone at some point.
Really? That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. He was part of this whole like bootlegging, racketeering, and gambling. And eventually, I think whenever he was like walking out of a courthouse, he just got like gunned down. But yeah, weird, like I don't know, weird connection.
Yeah. So it is interesting. I do find it easier and more interesting to talk about topics like this than to talk about myself. Now, I get that other people want to be like, here, let me tell you. I think maybe it's like venting for them. Let me tell you like what I ate for lunch or what the server said to me. Ha ha ha. Ha, or like, isn't that kind of weird? Or, and you're like, sure, I'll get a rundown of the nitty gritties. And you can kind of tell too, like some of these people, oh man, I was talking to somebody and they started telling me a story over again. And they were like, oh, whoops, I already told you that story. I forgot that we'd already talked today. And so you can kind of tell that it's just kind of like circular,
Oh
like,
yeah, it's just like circling over
yeah,
and
in their
over.
mind. And they're just kind of like, I have to say this to 3 people in order to get it out.
They got to meet a quota.
Yeah, which I don't mind. I'm like, absolutely. And even when they tell me the story again, they tell it slightly differently. So sometimes I don't even mention it. Like
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
I
you get
just
like new
saw,
details.
yes, exactly. I just saw John Mulaney, the comedian, twice. Just, it was total coincidence because my friend who I'm like house sitting, pet sitting for, she was like, "Well, let's go see him at the Forum before she leaves, on her trip or whatever." So I'm like, "Oh, cool, he's an interesting guy."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a great comedian.
Yeah, and new dad out of rehab,
Oh
so
yeah, especially
which
all the
he,
drama. I forgot
yeah,
about that.
yeah, he went into the whole thing, and then I thought, oh, and let's, because I invited some of my friends from New York to come, so I was not alone in the Hollywood Hills this entire time, right? So they came out, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to go to the Hollywood Bowl or something, because we can just walk there actually. And so the only show that was available for when they were here was John Mulaney again. So I saw him twice, but it was really interesting because he is like, he will even fake laugh, or I assume fake laugh. Maybe it's a real laugh, but he does it in a timed exact way, like laughs the identical way to his own
Oh
jokes. Yeah,
yes.
at certain points. It's really interesting to kind of, yeah, so I don't mind at all listening to people tell stories over again. And in fact, sometimes it's better the second time because you're like, wow, you paused for like dramatic effect in the exact same place in this
Yes.
story.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like so like timed.
yes, and you're kind of like, oh, am I the only one who's like masking or kind of acting or like putting on a little bit of a show
Yeah.
when I relate to other people?
I've often like I've noticed that with like different comedians. I think Dave Chappelle, whenever he tells jokes, like in a lot of them, there is some aspect of like laughing at it or laughing in the moment of it, but it
Mm-hmm.
happens like it is timed the exact same way.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, or it like comes up like there is this weird level of I don't know, like I actually find it annoying because I can see some comedians where I'm like, okay, you are like putting in your laugh there,
Mm-hmm.
um, as like a hey gang, let's all laugh along or some shit.
Right.
Um,
Like,
but
isn't
there's
this crazy? Ha ha ha!
yeah,
Even I'm
exactly. And it's
laughing.
like come on, bro, like that's annoying.
Uh-huh.
But other ones I'll see where even if they know they're doing it, it seems like they're able to like genuinely just laugh at like their own joke.
Yes.
And
So, oh man, this says the meeting will end in 10 minutes. How does this make sense? Because it's just
oh,
us two. Maybe it won't do it. Okay. We'll keep talking.
okay.
And then if we need to, we'll just start and stop a new one and stitch it together. So
Okay.
yeah. Yes. So the 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 openers for John Mulaney, right? One of them was that way. One of them was like laughing at his jokes, but in a way where you're just like you're just laughing at your own jokes. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, John Mulaney, no, it was like I will laugh for 3 seconds like this, ha 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 ha, in this moment, and then later I will be like ah, or like.
Yeah.
But it was super interesting because it was so, and you kind of understand too. Like John Mulaney is like really kind of crafting things to like the nth degree using the exact words. So like I'll give you a quick example. He was talking about excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. he was talking about how Steve, no, what's his name? Pete Davidson
Oh yeah.
called him while he was in rehab and was like, "Oh, I'm worried that I'm gonna take the fall for this. People are gonna blame me for getting you on drugs or whatever." And so John Mulaney's saying it's because Pete has tattoos, and he pauses and he says, "And I am plain." And just like the plain, the word, like perfect kind of word for that, and like his delivery, but he's just like that with everything. Like, and I think I really appreciate that in music when people pay attention that much to like every little thing, every little word, every little pause, every little thing. So it's not a rag on John Mulaney to me. People might prefer a different way, but I was just like fascinated by the process. But I just think it's kind of funny, like people I don't think of themselves that way, like they're kind of like John Mulaney, where they're just telling the same story over and over again in the same way. But I feel like I've definitely heard people do it like multiple times. So I don't know. There does seem to be a performative aspect of the way people talk to each other.
Yeah, I feel like it's always present. And I guess what I found so frustrating throughout my life in every relationship and interaction is like most people don't seem to be conscious of that. Like they don't be consciously thinking of that, or I guess maybe choosing that. And they also don't want to bring it up either. Like they don't want to talk about it as though they are trying to, like, I don't know, emphasize something or put on a performance or get a certain outcome. Like they don't want to see it as like they're trying to get people to think or feel something about them, about what they're saying. I guess they just want to see it as like, this is just me. This is just who I am. I talk like this, this is the kind of person I am. I'm expressing myself honestly. Why can't you just appreciate that? And yeah, my sense is like, I don't know. I like those details. I like that crap. I don't see the intention or the awareness of it as a it doesn't it doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't make it worse. It doesn't like discard it or I guess delegitimize it.
Yeah, because people are still making choices. I mean, sometimes people might say, "Oh, that's like an affectation or something,"
Oh
but
yeah.
maybe it is because, and imagine too, the visual art world is the same. Like we love it when people, make the precise choice to do this or that or something. But it kind of, I guess people get weirded out. I think you're right that people get weirded out when they think that you're being calculated with them. And they definitely don't want to seem like they're being at all calculated. Like calculated is the C word
Yeah.
for a lot of people because, so I had this new musician friend. And then for whatever reason, I'm like, yeah, I have this book or something. Tell her about the book. And then she starts reading the book and she's like, "Are you still this way? Are you still calculating?" And I was like, are you not calculating? How do you live your life? You just like randomly, like stumble into where to eat for lunch and stumble into who to be friends with and stumble into like what career to have or whatever, stumble into like what conversation everything has to be almost like, there was a musical form for a while where it was like they were really fascinated with like what will happen if composition style if we just have things random. So they'd like write little note figures or whatever on 3x5 cards, for instance, and like throw them up in the air and then collect
Oh,
them
okay, yeah.
and then write them. I mean, now we have computers that do that, like AI or whatever. But they wanted something like completely random and like, what would it be like if I don't calculate at all? But I mean, you're still calculating what you put on the 3x5 cards. And I think
Yeah.
that was kind of like what, so it's interesting because why is that such a dirty word for people? Why does that seem so weird that somebody might be calculating, whereas, I think you can easily find instances in which we appreciate it. We appreciate the fact that I even appreciate when people calculate a little bit. Is this a good time to tell a story
Oh
or
yeah.
should I wait? Does it
Yes.
seem like a stressful, traffic situation? We could just wait 5 minutes, like let's focus on the road for, whatever. But they would say that's not calculating, that was just like a impulse that arose in them, that was
Oh
almost
yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of, I think maybe I've mentioned this on one other video. There was a legal theory, legal realism, right? It was like in the 30s or 40s or something. I think, man, I want to throw out some names, but I'm not sure if they're legal realists, so maybe I should, because I'm I'm too rusty on the theory, but you can Google it. There's definitely a Wikipedia article about it. But ultimately, kind of the thought was that law was something to discover, you know, just like all the other natural laws. Because remember, they're just figuring out like, ooh, is penicillin or germ theory, you know, all this kind of crap where they're like, this is crazy, you know, stuff that we never realized or could see is like influencing our lives. Their patterns, you know, like this is why we get sick. But you know, they're just coming up with all these reasons for
Yeah.
things. So they just kind of assume, like idiots, that law was the same. That law was just kind of a natural law derived from some sort of natural law of the universe, and that we just had to keep kind of looking for it. And we'd realize that, of course, you know, you know, it would be kind of like thinking that music just rises naturally, which it actually does. Actually, music has a better argument for this because of the physics of sound waves. You know,
Oh
the fact,
yeah.
yeah, the fact that you have a fundamental tone, then you have like the overtone series, right? The harmonic series of like, then the octave. You can Google this too. They're the really cool things. So like when you pluck a string, it's going like this, but it's also going like this. And
Oh
it's also
yeah.
going in thirds, and it's vibrating in these different divisions of the string, which create little pitches that you can hear. And so like when you strike a note on the piano, you're really striking like 20 notes. You know, you can hear 20 of them or whatever. And that's how harmonics on a guitar work is you touch them
Yeah.
and then yeah, you're suddenly hearing that harmonic tone instead of hearing the fundamental tone. Anyways, so and because of that, there is like that's why we have the scales that we have. That's why we have the chords that we have, is because those are the notes that line up in the harmonic series. But for law, no, it's just judges making up crap, you know? It's like no one's discovering anything, you know? It's just complete whatever, but they did not want to admit that. That was like seen as being like, well, this is no science at all, law. And it's like, well, it isn't a science. But, you know, they wanted it to kind of just be like this kind of natural truth, you know, the same way that I think people feel like I'm not calculating anything. This is a natural, I'm just picking up on the natural truth, you know, that just something from deep inside of me is coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like I feel like there's like something with, I guess it's like I don't know, almost like a like flow state. Like I feel like with people who are especially like, I don't know, highly emotional and emotionally sensitive people, like they're they're reacting, there's so much in the environment that they like are getting a like strong um I guess impulse from.
Mm.
Uh
They have a
like
sensation of flow, like it feels like
yeah,
flow internally to them.
yeah, and when they express something, it is really just this like natural flow of wherever their emotions are going. I guess lately I've been thinking about it. Like I've been thinking about how much I've kind of had this sense that uh, almost like everybody's on drugs, all the time, in the sense that like everyone's brain has their own, you know, neurochemicals. They have their own like hormones. Like
Interesting.
everyone has their own system, and everyone's react.
Sorry, we had a Zoom issue, but go ahead. Do you
Oh
remember where
yes,
we were?
yeah. So I guess just in, I don't know, here's where I'll start it. So like whenever I have such a sense of like when I walk into rooms or basically do anything, like my sense of like what's going on is like very much about labels. Like it's kind of why life can be so like boring and repetitive, because it's just like people in spaces doing things, saying stuff. Like it kind of gets this, you know, lamp, table, door, person, this shirt, those, like it's all just like identifying it. And it seems like other people, they'll see things and it will remind them about something, and then it's something very like personal to them. So it's like, I don't know, like, oh, I love your watch. My grandfather had a watch just like that. We used to always go fishing growing up. and then they just kind of start like leapfrogging down this chain of like what's emotional to them about it. Um,
Mm,
so they're not like asking about like where you got the watch, what it's like, how it works. It kind of just like triggers this memory of them or something personal to their experience. And that kind of puts them into this like flow state. Um, and then they just work off that. Like I think a lot of people are they're just like they're going through life on this like high, like very sensitive emotional resolution programming, like where as soon as they feel any sort of like emotional discomfort, which can be easy, they quickly turn to something else that improves their mood. I mean, it's even kind of where I think like people like to decorate things in a particular way. Or I don't know if you've heard people talk about like, oh, this is like a sacred space.
mm.
Um, my room is a sacred space, or, I like having everything in my house just like this, the couch just right there. Um, and I can relate to some of that functionally, I feel like, but I don't know, like setting the atmosphere, having the like right energy of the room. I don't know, it like evokes some like feeling in them. It like puts them into a place. I mean, it's kind of even just like people using alcohol because they want to, reduce their inhibitions.
Mm.
And they want to like feel a certain vibe. I want to be able to talk more easily. Like if I go into a room and it's a certain like decoration, there's a certain aesthetic, colors and like decor, then I can like get into a certain vibe. Um, but if I go in there and instead of all these like, bright colors, there's like a bunch of dull colors, or it's dark or gray or plain, um, then it just feels like very off-putting to them, and they don't feel comfortable, and then they can't open up, they can't interact, they can't enjoy themselves.
Yeah, so I have kind of a weird story kind of about this. I lived in San Francisco, and I had it was like they had taken one of these houses and like basically cut it up. So each level was its own apartment. So my bedroom was like what was the front, I guess, parlor or
Oh,
something.
okay.
So it had like windows right out, I'd hear people walking, and talking, it was like right that front room or whatever had been made into a bedroom. And one time I had somebody over, and some guy, and he was like, no offense, can I tell you like something? And I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. And he was like, just that this room like just like demands, a lot of sex. Like a lot of sex should be happening
What?
in this room. And I was like, oh, okay, like an interesting thing to say, right? But then I kind of thought about it and I was like, is it the big windows out onto the street? Like what is it about this room? Like it has, crown molding, like which normally maybe old style. You'd expect it in a parlor, but not somewhere else, like the idea that it's like this front parlor and that, like you're behind closed doors and things that you shouldn't be doing, but you're doing in the front part. I don't know,
Oh
like what
yeah,
was the
yeah.
ish or something, but he had such like this visceral reaction. And then so this again, this house that I'm house sitting in has like this guest house. And when I walked into the guest house the first time, when I was first visiting, my friend's house, I was like, yeah, this is cool or whatever, kind of lofty. But then I started thinking, when I was going to invite my other friend from New York out here, I was like, they'll probably like this. It probably seems to have that same sort of vibe, and a room that's especially conducive to sex, And I am like, I don't really understand why people would think that, but I think like these big windows might be a thing, or like the high ceilings, the fact that the bed seems kind of dwarfed and like this cavern of things, and there's like a old retro video game in the middle, one of these table ones like Pac-Man or something, and like especially for like a dude, I was like a dude would be like, yeah, this is where the magic happens. But just like, yeah, I get it that people have weird kind of associations with things. And I even think so, like I went through therapy. I have like a stronger sense of self because of it. Also, my girlfriend Aria has been through therapy, has a stronger sense of self. And probably like, I don't know, maybe like 6 months to a year ago, she was like, I finally feel like I understand what nostalgia is, the feeling of nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, like this emotional connection to like a memory, not just a memory, but something new, like an emotional connection to a smell, an emotional connection to just something, whatever. And I think it's kind of funny, like normal people maybe are like, "Whoa, that's completely normal," or something, but also hoarders, I know a couple hoarders. One time I remember like vividly, I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, and like my dad had like kind of thought, like these kids need to be doing service projects every Saturday or whatever. It was like during one of these modes. And so he had found somebody in the city that I would lived in who was a hoarder, and he's like, "We're just gonna go over there and clean up." Now, this was like back in the times when people are like, "That's how we treat hoarders."
Yeah. I was like, that's not gonna go well at all.
Yeah, but I was like, I was so like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 what is happening? How could somebody live like this?" Like still remember kind of that experience of cleaning things up and being like, "Wow, there's just rats up in here." This room is just rats actually. Like, is it safe for us to be in here? Should we
Yeah.
send somebody else in here like with protective gear or something? But yeah, where people are like they're so it's basically kind of like cancer, right? You have a normal, I guess, cell in which you have emotional connections to weird things that aren't you, like a shirt or whatever else. That's not actually you, everybody, but you have an emotional connection to it for whatever reason, and then just like multiply it to you have an emotional connection to all sorts of things. Also, my dad's like a little bit of a hoarder, and it's interesting to see him because like stuff that he identifies as part of him, like an extension of him, is totally random. Like one time I left my first drum set. I left it in like a like kind of storage container. It was really nicely packed. It was like taking up hardly any space at all for a drum set. It was stacked all in the heads and stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then when I got back from whatever, college break or something, I was like, "Where's the drum set?" And he's like, "Oh, I gave it to charity." And
What?
I was like, "There's a million things in this storage shed that are worth 0. That was actually worth like 300. You could have sold that or whatever for money, and he's giving it to charity or whatever, whereas there's like other garbage in there that's like I mean, really, charity would not accept it. It would go straight to the trash. But he's holding on to that stuff for like dear life. So then I realized he's not holding on to this because of any actual objective value. It's a perceived value to him, it's an emotional value to him. And that was kind of an epiphany, too, to realize, wow, none of this
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Well, that kind of reminds me of I was renting a house once with a friend, and it was basically two houses right next to each other. The owner lived in the one right next to it. Um, actually, yeah, so it wasn't, I think it was like the owner's dad's house. He had to like get moved into a home because he was really old. So the owner was renting out the other one and trying to clear out his old house. And he invited us over once to see if like we wanted anything from there. And the guy's house had his wife had died, I think like 10 years earlier, and she was a collector of all these like clown figurines.
Mm,
So it was like, I mean, there was tons of them everywhere. It was like clown memorabilia everywhere. And
mm,
also like those like hobo clowns too. It was
yeah.
like all the old like porcelain ones, and they were just like they were in all these like glass cases with all this like lighting on them. They were arranged and decorated in like little chairs and stuff. There was one on like every shelf and over the fireplace, and the whole basement had just like tons of them stacked up everywhere. They were doing different poses and playing with balls and stuff. Like it became this whole, it was like her whole thing. Like she was into them. She would like, and she thought they had like value. Like she thought she would be able to like resell them too. Like it was like an investment, like a stock.
Mm.
But it was like clown stocks. And yes. And so like, yeah, I guess like I think it was like in the 50s or something, there was this like depression era clown figure that was like popular in the depression, and then like his son brought it back in the 50s and started making merchandise for it and going around with these conventions selling it to people. and it became like a collector item thing.
Mm.
And so yeah, she just like piled them up over and over and over again, until there's just like hundreds of them. Uh, and it was just like, it was so meaningful to her. She like
Yes.
yeah, it was like really, I don't know, I don't entirely know.
So this thing though, I feel like this is, I hope not too much of a leap. Maybe people will criticize me. I feel I've done a little bit of research in this, but I feel like this is what is driving NFT sales. Do you know what
Oh
NFTs are?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Well, my friend has like a whole like scam for a while with NFTs where he was just making a bunch of like digital giraffes that like did a dance and was like making money. I was like, how is any of this even possible? I can't even understand the concept. Like, this is just bullshit. And he's like, yo, I'm making like $100 a day or some shit.
nice. Good for
Yeah, I was like, good for you, but
him.
also I have no idea.
That's awesome. So, this person that I follow for other reasons, right? San Francisco, kind of like in the tech scene or whatever. And she was kind of saying, like, kind of on Twitter, was like, guys, I've been thinking about getting this NFT. It just really speaks to me, this particular series of NFTs. And she's like, it's just like a little bit steep, though. I forget what it was. It was like $10,000 or $20,000 or something for this NFT. And then people were like, and she's like, well, it's not just this though, it's like also an investment or something. And I was like, is it though?
Yeah.
Now that we're in a current, like people who are listening to this later, we're like in a cryptocurrency like fallout. The market has crashed a little bit for cryptocurrency. And some cryptocurrencies, like I guess Luna, are probably just gonna be dead, forever because they've reached a death spiral or whatever. But so like, yeah, I mean that it is true that if there's a market for something, it's like Beanie Babies, or whatever, these clown figurines. Sure, it's possible that these things might be found to be valuable, just like it's possible that like other random stupid things were found to be valuable in other, tribal or other prehistoric cultures or our culture. Like why is it that this is considered, certain things are considered more valuable? Crown molding, for instance. Why is that considered more valuable or something? But then she was totally like enthralled with these things, and she's justifying it. She's like, it's an investment, it's this, whatever. And somebody tried to explain to her, or somebody was like, if you like it so much, you want it for your avatar, just like save it and then just put it up as your avatar. And she's like, that's stealing. And I was like, it's not stealing at all. There's like, do you like
Yeah.
these people who buy the NFTs and don't even understand? You don't even own the image. You do not own the copyright to the image. Like some people bought, I guess, an NFT for like 3 million or something, and they were like, we're going to do a whole book on this image or something, but they don't even have the right to do that. It was just like stupid. I forget which it is. Otherwise, you'd be able to like Google it or something. But yeah, people, they don't understand. All you own is a place on the blockchain that points to the image. You have like no rights even to the image, right? Which,
Yeah. I think that's what like I was so confused about when talking to my friend about it. Was I was like, oh, so they like own that? And he's like, no, no, they just have a copy of it. I'm like, how is that? You just I don't understand. I don't understand where the value in any of that is at all.
exactly. But they do, like, there is something. I mean, this and the whole rise of NFTs has been crazy to me. And that's why, yes, I think it's like a good example too of where people are just like they find value in things that aren't them in like this emotional way. Like it has to be emotional. Because I mean, she said that it was for investment purposes, but can you imagine? And then it's so funny because by the time I'm reading these tweets, she has clearly bought it. Right? Her avatar has changed. So for like 3 hours or something, she was thinking about it and trying to get people's whatever, and then had bought it. So I was like, ooh, $10,000 or whatever, $20,000. Wow. Like, must be nice to just want to spend $20,000 on nothing. It was nuts.
Yeah, I don't understand. I I feel like there's this I don't know, I guess like you talked about with I feel like with like psychopathy, but with other like personality disorders, like the like weak sense of self and the issue with like identity. And I feel like there's like this kind of like strange like binary of having a stronger sense of self-determination versus having a stronger sense of like self-identification. And people who are like more emotional, like they struggle so much with like just kind of pursuing things, choosing things to do, or I don't know, feeling a sense of like, I don't know. It's they're like they're concerned about, well, how will people look at this, or how will people judge me, or what did this person think, and what are they doing? Like they need some like external, some group, some community, or something to kind of direct their life to a degree, but they also then feel like really attached to it, so they can feel a sense of like, well, these are my people, this is my group, um, and they feel a sense of like, oh, they're looking out for me, or they care about me, we're special, I don't know. Um, but they then get really lost on like kind of like sticking up for themselves, asserting themselves, having their own like opinion, or believing something. And also then getting swept up in like, oh, everybody's doing this. It's totally awesome. You have to get in right now.
Hmm.
And then they just, they just immediately buy in, or they just start like getting hooked on this, high of like getting an NFT or something, even if it doesn't seem to have actually any discernible value.
Yeah, or real connection to them, and I think that's the kind of interesting thing. Like, man, I wish had written this down. You said something about like the distinction between people who are listening to this on YouTube will just be able to rewind it and see that I'm stupid. The distinction between like emotional, what did you say, identification versus like it was
Like a
right.
determination.
Yeah, determination. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's like, well, maybe I can't, but I'll see.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's, yeah, some sense of like self-identification. There's like this, I don't know, it kind of seems like there's the difference between like maybe like an emotional reaction versus like kind of the calculating, like, which is like
Mm.
cognitive, like it's very thinking. And it seems like with, I don't know, that with like emotional identification, or like a self-identification, who you are, and yeah, I guess, I don't know, I see like, I've sort of been thinking about this like binary of a spectrum, of like two ends of a spectrum, and there's like a gradient in between. And some people have a sense of self that's based around action and what they are doing or creating or accomplishing, and then others have more a sense of being, like
Mm.
who they are, how they feel, what has happened to them. It is like a state of being, and they're and this is kind of like where they can just express like their feelings, like they want to express their feelings, they don't need to be understood, or even for you to understand, just to let them listen, just to let them talk. um, and they live their life in relation to, I feel like it's even kind of like what you talk about with your dad, like I think there's some degree of like they're not as they don't like change as much. They need some sense of like stability and constancy, and that's like their sense of self.
Hmm.
And they like get emotionally attached to like, oh, I read like the house they live in, the clothes they have, um, the different possessions, like that's becoming a part of who they are, their whole like life story, their sense of normalcy, like where they get what makes them feel comfortable or good. And if you start changing those things or taking it from them, it's like it does become this like threat to who they are. And they like really need to maintain a certain image of who they are. But it's like with, I don't know, I guess I see myself so much in terms of like action, like what I can do. Can I go out and move? Can I accomplish things? Can I be like producing something or engaging in an interesting activity? Um, and yeah, there's just this like like I have a more of a sense of like a need for change or a want for change and a variety. Like the stagnation kind of like drives me insane once I've done something, once I've like found its use or whatever. or like the novelty of things wears off really quickly. So unless like it's something productive, like I mean, I guess I kind of see this as like the difference between like collectors and I don't know, whatever the opposite of that would be. Like there's people who like are super into like gaming and gaming merchandise, and you see like I'll see it on TikTok, like their like rooms are just decked out with all these different action figures from and like statues and posters and all the merchandise. Like they want to get all the merchandise from their favorite band or their favorite game or their movie or like this TV series. And it's all super meaningful to them, and they like clean it and dust it and have lights on it, and it's all like nicely arranged. And it's just stuff piling up all around them. I mean, it's kind of like the clean version of like a hoarder.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I guess I don't know, I'm going all over the place with this, but like so I play music, and I play guitar, and one thing I've never understood is so many like musicians just have like so many instruments. They just, and it's the same instrument. They have just guitar after guitar after guitar.
Especially guitarists. What's up with them?
Yeah, like, and it's like, yeah, well, this one has these pickups and these strings, and this one's this color. And did you know that in 1956, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, I have like an electric, and I have an acoustic, and I have a bass. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've got all of them that I need. Like, you know, I can plug one in, I can play one without a plug, and one of them's really low. Um, and I don't understand why you need 16 variants of an electric guitar. But yeah, all of that like matters. It's like it's a whole new thing to them. I don't, you know, sometimes I play it when I'm feeling this one out. This one's my fucking open mic guitar. But this one's the with the band guitar. And you ask like, hey, maybe we can just play with this one. It's like, no way. I mean, it's like kids who are just like, my peas cannot touch my mashed potatoes. They
Right.
cannot touch at all. They are separate worlds. They are entire universes. I have to cleanse my palate before I go try the other one. Um,
So it's funny because I know a guitarist. I was talking to her about like playing, and something about like my playing music has always been a little bit weird, I think. Like uh it's really cognitive. It's really even mathematical. It's like pattern based. Like, I play bass on like jazz stuff, and to do it like a bass line, it's just like mathematical. It's like number of number of beats, number of like what chord we're currently on, what chord we're going to, the chord after that, the chord we came from. And it's just like all these inputs, input, and then it just spits out what the bass line is basically, with the variations. And I just choose from like the problem, the mathematical problem that my brain has solved, right? I'm not like listening, like I don't play very well by ear. So I was talking about kind of this with the guitarist, and she was kind of saying like, oh, I just actually try to zone out when I'm playing. She's like, I feel like I play best when I'm not thinking at all. And I think this illustrates a little bit something about kind of what people are trying to get at. That is like this sense of flow, where she has almost ceded her agency to kind of these, what essentially is just, I mean, she may think that it's good playing, but it's just muscle memory. Like what really is it that you're playing if you're not thinking while you're playing? It's like no creativity. It's just your muscle memory. It's just other things that you've played before. And she even kind of said, because we were playing stuff that was like written out or whatever. She's like, well, yeah, it's like really heavily written out, and I wish I could kind of play my own stuff, but also it's informing, like the stuff that she's playing on the side, like she's incorporating the new licks or whatever, the new things into her other playing. And I was like, yeah, and this is just what's happened to you your whole life, like what you learned in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. That's everything's just in there, and you're just like, it's just kind of coming out like in your little kind of small talk stories or whatever, right? It's like basically the same story with the things. That's what's happening, even though you're not aware of it. And I thought, but I like to be aware of it. I want to be a John Mulaney of a musician, which is to really think and use the word plain. And I am plain. It's a very funny word. He could have said, I don't have tattoos, or, whatever, but the I am plain. So it's interesting to think, like as at least as applied to musicianship, where people have this preference to kind of almost cede their agency to what is just you know, like a fictional god, let's say, like an icon of just flow, of just this is what's meant to be, of just this is the natural thing. And it's like, well, what does it mean to be natural thing? It just means subconscious. That's the only thing. You're still doing the same thing I'm doing. You're just not conscious of it, right? It's kind of like these people who like they're like you know, I fell in love, there's nothing I could do, you know, I fell in love or something, like, and just as if there was no choice to like look at the person in the first place, no choice to kind of lust after the person in the first place, no choice to kind of have that type of person as like your type, you know, like as if there was nothing that could be controlled about the idea of like falling in love. There was like zero choice points along the way. So I do agree that this that you said, and this time I did write the stuff down. So you're like identity as being a sense of acting versus being. And certain people seem really invested in identity as a sense of being. And I think it's a really interesting distinction because I was just talking to somebody recently about this, you know, where I was like talking about identity. And I was like, you know, I think that most people are not self actualized. And this person said, no, I know a lot of people that are self actualized. You know, I have a lot of friends that I feel like are self actualized. And I thought, that can't possibly be. You know, just statistically, and just probably my guess at who your friends are, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. I just doubt that they are self actualized. But I think if you do have like this identity as a sense of being rather than a sense of acting, then I think is easier to feel just comfortable, just feel like a sense of kind of like this is fine. You know, it's like being in the bathtub, you know, where it's like, who cares that you have deadlines or whatever, because you're in the bathtub, you know, it's very warm. You know, like there, or a vacation. It's almost just like an avoidant way of thinking, not in a negative, I don't mean to say this in a judgmental sense, but just like if I don't think about something, then it's not there. And I do think that there's a certain amount of that, you know, like some people think too much about whatever's happening, you know, think too much about like the war in Ukraine, right? Or think too much about, you know, I don't know, whatever else it is, things that don't actually impact them, you know, or don't impact them very little. And I think they're like too kind of invested or care too much about those types of things. On the flip side, though, there are these people who are just like, unless it's natural, you know, like natural versus calculated, unless it's natural and it's just coming from a place where I'm not even hardly consciously aware of it, then they're suspect. You know, they really are trying to have that, let's say, aesthetic of their life experience, it seems.
Yeah, it's so crazy you said that. There's a few things that I thought of. I I totally, first of all, I totally agree with you on the whole like self-actualized thing. Um, I I kind of had to like learn to, I mean, I've definitely had to like learn to like chill out on like saying anything about, I don't know, anyone, anytime anyone is expressing themselves. I definitely have to be like careful about what I say because people will talk about like, oh, I'm doing great, or like or like people talk about like, oh, I've had this like revelation. I'm really understanding myself now, and then they list a whole bunch of things where I'm like, you got that completely wrong. That is not. I can see clearly that even like the way you said that, and the fact that you said that, if you were those things, you would not say those things.
Hmm.
Um, like and it seems to be like they need, it's almost like they like, oh, I'm self-actualized, like saying that makes them feel good.
Yeah.
Like there's the state of it, uh just I mean, it's kind of like almost like a fake it till you make it, where they can just be like, yeah, I'm the best, yeah, I'm doing great, things are fine. And then if everyone's like, oh yeah, things are great, you are self-actualized, they're like, yay, okay, cool, it's true now.
Yes.
um and then they can just keep writing off of that. And I've always been terrible at, well, I don't know, talking to people and like compliments, and I don't know, most like feedback or having conversations to people, it's always been like really difficult because nothing people will say will necessarily make me feel anything in particular, so I always need them to explain it more. um it's, you know, well, what about that did you like, why did you like that, what did I do? There's always this kind of why.
Mm.
um I need to understand how the parts work together. If you just tell me, you know, something nice, like, okay, that's cool. I guess I appreciate that, but I don't really know what to do with that. It doesn't change my state. I don't feel any different. You've just kind of told me something, almost like just telling me, you know, it's this temperature outside. Um, so it doesn't really, I don't really know what to do with that. And it's there's like, yeah, there's always, I don't know, I always was like one of those kids who asked why over and over and over again, and I needed to know more. And I only actually know that because my sister told me about it. She's older than me, and she was like, "Yeah, you know, most kids are curious, but you really really like um overdid it about asking why about everything." I mean, there's like a sense of like needing to understand, like not naturally just like rolling with it. Um, I mean, and I mean, even especially early in my teens, like hanging out with people would just like sit around and talk. Like it was small talk, and it always made me feel like very uncomfortable and kind of claustrophobic. Like there's the sense of like, what are we doing? Where are we going? Where is it happening next? What is our plan? What is going to like occur? And people, it doesn't seem there's like any like thing to do at all for them. Like there is just the sitting around, the talking is just feeding them. Um, and lately I've been, God damn it. Okay, I always get derailed with where I was going with this or what my other point was.
That's why I take
Self-actualized.
notes.
Yeah, I probably should do that. The self-actualized, and then I kind of said something about that. What else? Damn it. I don't even um I guess I like, yeah, do you remember what else you said?
Yeah. So yeah, I talked about people have the identity, kind of riffing on what you said, as either a sense of acting or a sense of being. And the people that have this sense of being, it's almost like to complete that illusion that things are just happening naturally, almost like legal realism illusion,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
yes. Then they have to really be not cognizant of it. They have to kind of like pull the wool over their own eyes about like what's really happening, which is just that everything is the same except your stuff is just happening subconsciously. But it's not as if like these licks, these guitar licks you're playing are are coming from a place of nowhere. They're coming
Oh
still from a
yeah.
place of your own previous experiences, your previous things that you've learned, you know, just as much as they are for me. You know, if I'm choosing a bass lick, you know, where it's like, this is how I understand the world, but I'm actively choosing, you know, like I do have that identity, especially now, of being like of acting and also falling in love versus choosing love is one thing I said.
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay, so I connect a lot with the music thing. So like with playing guitar, I've always played like by patterns, like
Hmm.
um learning scales, like learning licks, chord progressions. It's kind of just like I'm just piecing together a bunch of stuff. And then eventually, like I try to find something that sounds good. Like it was always very like sensory to me. I would find like a chord or some like riff that kind of gave me this like jolt of energy. And then I would kind of just keep trying to build on that. And I always had difficulty with playing with people because they would talk about like, well, just feel into it, man. You know, they're
Hmm.
all like guitar dudes. Um, just find the vibe. And I had no idea what that meant. And it was a pattern thing. Like you're accumulating this catalog of, you know, muscle actions you're doing with your hands and your fingers. They sound good, and then you're like kind of mixing up the patterns in all sorts of ways. Almost like, I guess maybe, I don't know, kind of like a kaleidoscope or something. You know, there's like all these different shapes and colors, and you're just like mixing them together in interesting patterns. But what I didn't realize, and I've only experienced this like really limitedly, was I think for the first time last year when I was smoking weed. It was like THC wax, if you've ever heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time I ever like had any sense of understanding what feel into it was, because whenever I was playing, I had no sense of, okay, jump here, try that, throw this chord, see how that sounds. It was this weird like intuition of just, I know what's coming next. Like the emotion is just like, this is what has to happen next. This is just what it is. Like, it's part of the feeling. Like this, the note like made me feel something. The playing the music could actually like make me like cry, like it was an emotional thing.
Hmm.
And I don't have that anymore. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where like I could have it in that state. And I don't even always have it whenever I'm like high. But for whatever reason, it was that sense of like, oh, this is just what it is. I'm just like, you know, I mean, kind of like with the falling in love, like I'm just falling in love. There's no choice here. It's just, that's what's happening now. And we're in love, and you know, la la la, you know, I mean, kind of the happily ever after, just like everything's gonna work out.
Yeah, and I
Don't
guess
think
now I
about
have to
that.
get divorced, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
where it's like
like, well, you also like didn't have to start that relationship in the first place when
exactly.
we all warned you, and you could see that he was obviously an alcoholic and had, you know, a record and no job, and but he was going to change. He was going to be different,
Hmm.
you know, or whatever it
They had
is.
that connection, you know,
Yeah,
where the connection is like, yeah, it just it's really interesting your story about THC. And I do like tap into my intuition. I do it like really choicey though, you know, like I ask intuition questions, you know, like, and there probably have been times, I don't know, musically or otherwise, where you know, where you're in flow, right? And you have the sense that it's whatever. When you know, a really good example is just driving in traffic or whatever, like where you're like, oh, here I am home. I kind of zoned out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's what's happening. I really think with these other people, like you know, that's what's happening is that you're just muscle memory. You're just your mind is like, oh, we subconsciously can take over with this, but it's not like anything new's happening. You're just whatever inputs your brain receive. Now, here's the interesting thing about intuition is your conscious mind can be like it's can be kind of like spotlighty, right? You know, like okay, you're focusing only on the stuff that you're paying attention to or that you're currently drawing up from your memory about, right? And so I can see how intuition's nice because intuition is like this soft haze of light, you know, rather than a spotlight that's hyper focused on one thing. Intuition, I think, when you do consult it, it can draw from like different sources, but everything is still coming from somewhere, you know, everything's still coming from a memory, everything's still coming from somewhere else. But it can be nice because it's like, well, you know, what about the thing that you know I once thought of, you know, 2 years ago or something. Like intuition can remember that easier than my conscious mind can remember it, I guess is a good way to put it. um, you know, we're gonna have to do this one more time. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
do the Zoom. But before we do, real quick, I wonder if I have time to suggest, at least when we get back on, let's talk about this idea that facts have meaning. Because I had a similar experience as a child where I was like, okay, sure, these are facts. And at first, it was enough to just know the facts, like ask why and get a fact. But then I started understanding that facts have meaning to people. So I was like, I can't just hear the fact. I also have to hear their explanation of what the meaning
Oh, that's
is.
the worst part too.
Yeah. But
That's the
let's,
worst part. Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.